This is KPPQ LP Ventura, 104.1 FM, and we're in the Women's Room, where we appreciate and support each other. I'm your host, Kathleen Good. My guest today is Betsy Patterson, President of the League of Women Voters of Ventura County. We're so happy to have you here today for a Zoom interview, Betsy.
Thank you.
After 35 years as an emergency room physician, Betsy looked around for some retirement activities and decided to engage more in an organization in which she was already a member, the League of Women Voters. I'll let Betsy describe how exhilarating her post-retirement work has been. Which activity gives you the most satisfaction?
Well, I must say that I got really fired up about the high school voter registration program. Our state initiated a 2-week period of civic engagement for high school students in the fall and another 2 weeks in the spring. And during that time, the social science teachers that teach government and economics and American democracy to the seniors are encouraged to at some point during that 2-week period, help the students get registered to vote.
Oh, good.
And in California, 16 and 17-year-olds can pre-register to vote. So all the students in the class could pretty much register or pre-register to vote, with the idea being that the 18-year-olds would actually be able to vote. And the finding that also it's a captured audience, and 16 and 17 and 18-year-olds can be educated about what civic engagement is, what's important about voting and why it's important to vote, and can be encouraged to vote. And studies have shown that if people vote in 3 consecutive elections, they become lifelong voters. And so the idea is to engage these high school students just at the time when they're about to be eligible to vote, so that they will vote that first time and then maybe vote a couple more times and become engaged in the voting.
That is exciting.
It is exciting. That was my first area that I got excited about. And there are other areas, but that's the primary one that drew me in.
Right. And on the ballot this year, they were asking if 17-year-olds could vote in the election if they were 18 before the end of the year. Do I have that correct?
So no. It's primary 17-year-olds being able to vote in a primary election if they are going to turn 18 before the general election in the fall.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, I think along with a little of your history and background, perhaps now would be a good time to describe the history of the League of Women Voters, and especially this year, the 100th birthday of the 19th Amendment, women's right to vote, and the 100th birthday of the League of Women Voters.
Yes, and it's not a coincidence that the League of Women Voters formed a national organization after the passage of the 19th Amendment, giving women their right to vote. Women across the country, often in the Western states, had the right to vote in some elections, sometimes local school boards, some were able to vote in presidential elections, but it wasn't a national right to vote until the passage of the 19th Amendment. And with that passage, the suffragists who had been fighting so long, 72 years or so, to get that right for women to vote, realized now there were millions of new voters who would benefit by some education on what the process is of voting and how to get informed about the candidates and the issues so they could make wise decisions when they voted. Hence the formation of a League of Women Voters, of a national organization.
Okay, so what is the mission of the League of Women Voters? I know it was in there somewhere, but let's say it right out.
So very succinctly, the mission is empowering voters and defending democracy. So our focus is really on encouraging citizens to become civically engaged, which includes registering to vote, getting informed about the candidates and the issues, and then actually exercising their right to vote so they have a voice in our democracy.
Right. So tell us a little about Harry T. Byrne and how he did what his mama said.
So Harry T. Byrne was a young, newly elected member of the Tennessee legislature in 1920. And he came from a rural area of Tennessee. And when Tennessee was discussing ratification of the 19th Amendment, which would make it the 35th state to ratify it, which would be the last state that was needed for it to become a constitutional amendment. He initially was in the naysayers. He knew that his constituents back home were not really in favor of giving women the right to vote. And he actually entered the state legislature that on the day of the vote, wearing a red rose in his lapel, which was a sign that he was going to side with the nay voters.
Oh.
However, he had received a letter that morning from his mother saying, "I haven't really heard what your position is on this, and son, do the right thing and give women the right to vote." And so he broke the tie and voted in favor of the ratification of the 19th Amendment, making Tennessee the final state to ratify it and making it an amendment.
Oh, wow. Well, always do what your mother says. And thank goodness he did. When I was talking to a friend about interviewing you, the president of LWV, she asked me if the organization is nonpartisan because she knew that you also take positions on issues and ballot measures. Could you clarify for your listener who or what the League supports?
Yes, so the League is a nonprofit organization, and the IRS actually has rules of what nonprofit organizations can do. And one of the rules is that it must be nonpartisan, which means we cannot support or oppose any particular candidate or any political party. And that has been our stance since the very beginning in 1920. So nonpartisan just means we do not support a candidate or a political party. However, over the past 100 years, various leagues across the nation have done studies looking into issues, whether it relates to water, the environment, education, voting rights, a variety of issues, and have developed positions that have been accepted nationally as positions of the League of Women Voters. So if there is a ballot proposition that is either supported or not supported by one of our positions, that is the time in which we will take a position of either supporting or not supporting it. And this year, or this election coming up, there are 12 different ballot propositions. And there are 3 or 4 that the League has no position on because we haven't done any study and we don't have a position, so we don't either support it or oppose it. We remain neutral on it.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That clarified it. And I'll have my friend listen. What are some of the issues that that the League as a national organization considers progressive public policy or human rights issues? You said prior to our interview that human rights issues are things that you would support. And what are some of these?
So as you could guess by the name, the League of Women Voters, we care very much about assuring that all the citizens who are eligible to register to vote are given that access to voting. So we want registration to be as transparent but as easy as possible for people that are eligible to register to vote. We want access to the polls to be easy and alternative options for voting. For example, this election here in California, this is the first time we've had a statewide vote by mail where all of the registered voters in California get an official ballot in the mail. That gives you the opportunity of voting safely and in the comfort of your home, which is easy. You don't have to find a way to a particular polling station on a particular day. There's early voting. There's very multiple options of ways of voting. And the league encourages allowing people as much access to voting as possible. In addition, we oppose any attempt to suppress voting, which involves, closing polling stations or making only one polling station available within hundreds of miles in rural areas where people may not have access to a car or a bus to get to the polling station. So voting and voting rights and representation of the people in those areas are important issues to us also. There are other issues. We basically have a position that we feel healthcare should be available and affordable to everyone in the United States.
Oh.
And so we will take positions and we'll lobby and be activists on positions related to access to healthcare and quality healthcare in areas like that. We realize that it's a complicated issue and that there are many stakeholders at the table that we need to all work with. But that's one area where generally a humanitarian stance of healthcare for all powers our advocacy.
Okay. And what about climate change action or environmental regulations?
Right. Climate change is definitely one of the areas that we feel there needs to be a attention paid to it. We are believers and supporters of scientific evidence and research that's gone along with that. We also feel that this is our only planet for living on.
Right.
We need to protect the air, the water, the soils, to make sure that we keep it a healthy climate for us to continue to survive here.
Right.
And so we do have positions on the environment and climate change.
And last one here, gun control. Do you support that?
So that's a good way of asking the question. We support the Second Amendment, which says people have a right to own a gun. But we also advocate for safe gun ownership, training and safe use of the guns, and guns that have a purpose that is not just for mass killings. Right? So it's also a complicated issue with many aspects to it, and we try to listen to all sides and try to find common ground to find solutions that will keep people safe, but with their freedoms and rights to own guns.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. Our system of government has been referred to as a sick democracy. And I know when we talked prior to our interview today, you mentioned that citizens before the last election in 2016 were kind of disengaged, perhaps not apathetic, but just not really engaged in the voting process. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I think this has actually been an issue for longer than just a few years before 4 years ago.
Okay.
I mean, the voting public and voter turnout in the United States has never come close to that of, say, Australia, where it's mandated that you vote, and if you don't vote, you get a fine.
Yeah, and they probably
have a high percentage of turnout. We feel it's a choice that people have the right to make that choice, but our voter turnout, can be 50%, and that means half the people in the country are not represented in the election.
Right.
And more recently, in the last 4 years, there has been more engagement. People recognize that if they don't vote and don't use their voice, that the elected officials don't feel like there's any other voice other than the voice of the people who voted for them. And that's not true. The elected officials represent all of us, and we
Right.
all have the right to communicate with them and express our issue or our concerns or our desires. Um, and I think people for a long time just thought, well, the government kind of runs and does what it's going to do, whether I have any say into it. It doesn't really affect me in my day-to-day life. And one of the things we try to communicate to the high school students is that while maybe national offices, like exactly who your congressperson is or who your senator is, may not affect your day-to-day life, they do make decisions that affect the future of our country and the direction it's going in. And then as you come down the ballot to things like city councils, county supervisors, school boards, they can make decisions that affect your day-to-day life. And
Right.
so we try to encourage them to get involved and understand what the issues are. Not everyone is, madly in love and excited about politics. A lot of people find it somewhat dry, somewhat boring. Policy discussions sometimes seem like there's a bunch of words that lawyers use that not everybody in the community normally uses. But one of our goals in the League of Women Voters is to try to break down those complicated legal terms into terms that people can understand what the
Right.
effects of the laws are or the policies are.
Okay. Well, we're going to have to leave it right there for a moment and do a station ID. This is KPPQ LP Ventura, 104.1 FM, and we're in the women's room where we appreciate and support each other. I'm your host, Kathleen Good. We are talking to Betsy Patterson, president of the League of Women Voters of Ventura County. Betsy is here to talk about the organization, its 100th anniversary this year, and to share current voting information with you. Okay, and we're back. So to go on a little bit, the League of Women Voters was, as you said earlier, originally formed to educate women when the 19th Amendment was passed. But you said you don't represent only women, that you support all voters. Could you talk to that idea a little bit?
Sure. When the League of Women Voters was formed, it was formed and directed at educating these new women voters.
Right.
But we've always felt it is important for all voters to be informed about the issues and the candidates and their positions on the issues so that they can vote wisely when they go to the polls. So from its start, the League supported educating all voters, men and women, it was in 1972 that the League of Women Voters recognized that they really probably should open up their membership to men also, since men make up half of the community.
Right.
So we have had men in our membership since 1972, but we have always supported the rights of every voter,
Right.
and the importance of every voter getting educated.
Okay. I'll just read a quote from a book I'm reading right now titled The Library Book by Susan Orlean. Here's a quote: "Free access to information is necessary to a democratic society for open debate and the creation of public opinion." And this is one of the ways the League assists voters by providing them with a sort of library of information via the internet on League of Women Voters Ventura County website. I checked it out and I was impressed with links to sites like ProPublica, Fact Checker, Taxpayers for Common Sense, and so forth. I know you're not the webmaster, but just talk a little about the kind of information that voters can easily access and all in one place on your website.
So local leagues direct most of their information towards their local voters, but we also utilize information that's provided from the League of Women Voters of California and sometimes even the League of Women Voters of the US.
Uh-huh.
But for example, the League of Women Voters of California every year has a couple of publications that are very useful. There's first the Easy Voter Guide, which is great information for anyone who's new to voting, so high school students or new voters who are not familiar with the process, what the ballot is going to look like, how you fill out the ballot, how you return the ballot, where you
Mm-hmm.
find the right place to go. So that's it. That's a publication that they put out every election called the Easy Voter Guide. Another publication they put out are the pros and cons to the ballot propositions. And they go through each ballot proposition and try to break it down into what the ballot proposition is actually trying to do, what the pros of voting for it and what the cons are or what the pros and cons are voting for or against it
Uh-huh.
are. And they published that that is just basically pros and cons, and then maybe a link to who is funding it, who is supporting it. And after they have published that, then the league will look at the ballot propositions and decide which ones they can support or oppose, or which ones they will remain neutral on. And then they publish that, which is called Vote with the League.
Oh,
So
okay.
there are several publications that that we have links to on our website about that. We
Uh-huh.
also have links to the process of voting and getting registered to vote, and we have some videos made and um, a variety of information on our website that
Really, a
can help
whole
educate.
library. And then talk about the information on the LWVs of California site, the Voters Edge California. I visited this one and found it really helpful. Could you talk a little about that?
Yes, the Voters Edge California is our state's version of the National League's 411.org or 411vote.org,
Uh-huh.
which is a site that solicits information from each candidate. And the candidate has the opportunity to write a personal statement, to list their top 3 priorities, and anything else they would like to put on that site. The advantage of the Voters Edge in California is that it is also partnered with something called MapLight, which also reveals who is funding and who is supporting that particular candidate or that particular ballot proposition, which sometimes gives you a little bit more information about
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
those resources are coming from and who thinks this is an important and good proposition or candidate.
Right, right. Although I know that I'm registered to vote, I tried out the Am I registered to vote button and found it really easy to check right there that I was and showed that I was indeed registered. And there's also a clear button that removes your personal information. I was happy about that. While you can also call the elections office, this was actually much quicker and easier because one year we were gone and we got back and I just wasn't sure, so I called them and they're very good about it. But I like this. Am I registered to vote button? Also, tell us about how you can register online on the League website. Do registrants need any special documentation to register online?
Sure. To register to vote online or to register to vote on a paper registration form, there are certain pieces of information that they need that will help the elections office identify you as who you say you are.
Uh-huh.
The online version asks for your California driver's license, or if you don't have a driver's license but have an ID, California ID card, they ask for that number. And they also ask for the last 4 digits of your social security number. When you register on paper, it's either or. You don't have to have both of them. And that is a little bit because you are going to be signing this paper registration form and mailing it directly to the elections office. When you register online, it goes through the Secretary of State's office. And the Secretary of State and the DMV have partnered so that the elections offices have access to signatures that you have given at the DMV. When you've registered your car, when you've gotten your driver's license, any of those things. So you have probably a series of signatures available from the DMV.
And they actually check.
And yeah, oh, absolutely. That's how they know that this vote coming from you is from you and not from someone who's trying to vote in your place.
So it's actually kind of difficult to commit fraud in voting.
Well, it is difficult because one of the things that will happen with this election is, in a normal election, when you go to a polling station, you go in, you give them your address, they find your address, your name on the polling list for that area, and then you sign your name there. And the elections office compares that signature with the official signature they have on file. When they send out the ballots by mail, they include a return envelope that you can mail back. And probably the most important thing after completing your ballot and putting it in the envelope is signing the back of the envelope and dating it, because that is their way, before they even open the ballot, they verify that this is a ballot that has come from a registered voter that they have in their system. So they compare the signatures right there, and that's how you know that it's your vote that's coming in.
Okay, and could you give for our listener the website address quickly before we move on to another area?
Sure, it's easy. You can get there by going to LWV Ventura County, all one word, .org.
Okay, LWV Ventura County.org, all one word. Okay, so you're all also working pretty hard, especially in the year of the pandemic. Now, you also make public appearances and arrange for candidates to speak. Would you give your listener a sampling of the venues you speak at? Just a couple, because we're running out of time. This year, you're doing a lot of Zoom meetings, right?
A lot of Zoom meetings, because a lot of community organizations are meeting by Zoom rather than in person. So let me go here and look and see, because there are a lot of organizations that have invited me to come. Just give a little information about what to expect in this upcoming election. The Unitarian Universalist Church in the Conejo Valley invited me to come give a talk. I have given the same presentation to the two different centennial celebrations that occurred. Vision 2020 had a toast to tenacity, and the Conejo Valley had a centennial celebration, and I talked with them. I have spoken to various political clubs. I've given a presentation to the Simi Valley High School students who were going to have an online voter registration drive.
Oh, wow. You know, I'm going to have to interrupt you here with this wonderful list, but we're running out of time. And I want you to give a little bit. You and the league went to meet with Mark Lund, the big guy in elections, a registrar voter. And I wonder if you could quickly give some information that he has given you about voting this year. When, where, how?
Yes, so this is an election that's different from any other election we've had, because on October 2nd, the elections office will start mailing out the official ballot to every registered voter in the county. So over the next few days, you can expect to receive them. On October 6th, the drop boxes that are around the county, they have 34 drop boxes that are around the county that you can drop your completed ballot in its return envelope into, and they get collected every day, Monday through Friday, and taken back to the elections office. If by October 15th you have not received your ballot, you should call the elections office and get that information, and let them know you haven't received the ballot. They can send you a new one. If you are not registered to vote, the last day to register to vote and get a ballot by mail is October 19th. You can still register to vote and vote after that, but you won't get your ballot in the mail.
Right. And early voting start in person starts on what date?
So the vote centers that are replacing polling centers across the county will be open October 31st, which is a Saturday, November 1st, Sunday, November 2nd, which is Monday,
Uh-huh.
those days from 10 a.m. until 6 p.m. And then on election day, they'll be open from 7 a.m. until 8 p.m.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Betsy. I want to thank you and all your members and volunteers for the wonderful work you're doing in educating us about voting. This is KPPQ LP Ventura, 104.1 FM, and we're in the Women's Room where we appreciate and support each other. I'm your host, Kathleen Good.